Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. Welcome to Resistance Live for the 8th of April, 2025. It's kind of a strange day, and I'm also off center here. Let me move myself over a little bit so I'm like right on key for you guys. Okay, so there's a lot going on, and we have to talk about the events in front of the Supreme Court yesterday because they're honestly like really devastating, and this is not going to be one of those days where I can kind of like talk you guys off the ledge. So like be forewarned. I have to kind of like explain exactly how this works and exactly what is, coming next in light of how this has been flagged. So just like sit tight. It doesn't mean all hope is lost. It doesn't mean you should stop taking action. It just does mean that things are really dire. And I want everybody to understand kind of what we're up against. So, all right. Today for our visually challenged viewers, I'm wearing a purple top. My hair is down. I'm a pink-skinned, green-eyed, dirty, blonde-haired woman. I am coming to you from occupied Muncie, Lenape, and Mohican land. And in my office, I'm sitting in front of my bookshelf and my yellow utility cart, as usual. Okay, so we had two decisions out of the Supreme Court yesterday, one of which is a temporary stay, an administrative stay. And those of you who have been here for a long time know that this is actually standard operating procedure in front of the Supreme Court. And I warned you all yesterday that a temporary stay might be coming on the issue of the mandatory return of a Maryland father who everyone admits was wrongfully deported to the concentration camp in El Salvador. That temporary stay was granted. Briefs are due today at 5 o'clock in front of the Supreme Court. So the thing about that is that while it is ordinary standard operating procedure for the Supreme Court to grant a temporary administrative stay in emergency proceedings, the fact that they were even willing to do it for one day is a sign. And that was the first thing that happened at the Supreme Court yesterday. The second thing that happened at the Supreme Court yesterday was that SCOTUS allowed Trump to essentially lifted a stay and is now allowing Trump to deport people to anywhere under the Alien Enemies Act. So I have to remind you all of what the Alien Enemies Act does. Essentially, it says that anyone who is not a citizen of the United States, who the U.S. has designated as an enemy, can be removed from the country or otherwise detained. And it is the act that was used during World War II to put Japanese Americans, not just like foreign citizens, but Japanese Americans, into camps inside the United States, one of whom is the quite famous George Takei. Okay. Folks need to understand that this is a new granting of permission. This act has not been used fundamentally in any mass way since World War II. And this is fundamentally a granting of power to Trump that was deeply questionable at best. Now, what they have done is essentially lifted the TRO that will allow these deportations to foreign gulags to continue, while also allowing lower court proceedings to continue that may in the end result in that act not being applicable. However, this is a pretty solid indicator of where the Supreme Court's going to come out on this. And it was a 5-4 decision with, wait for it, I predicted that there was going to be some movement here, Amy Coney Barrett joining the liberal wing of the court. Now, I have to say something about this because there are a few people who are kind of finding nuance in this decision, and it's worth pointing out the legal nuance of it. And then I'm just going to tell you what my commentary on the legal nuance is. All right. Folks are pointing out that 9 justices, all 9 of them, did in fact stand for the proposition that you have to have reasonable notice that you're about to be removed, and you have to have an opportunity to challenge that via a writ of habeas corpus. Again, those of you who have been here for a long time know that what habeas corpus does is it is a procedural mechanism that allows someone to petition a court to force a government official to essentially do the right thing. Habeas is used in all sorts of formats with regard to criminal justice. It can also be used to force a government agency to do something. So essentially what the court said, all of them, was that people who are under threat of deportation under the Alien Enemies Act have to be told that that is coming, and then they can petition for habeas corpus. The problem with all of this, oh wait, let me just give you the other thing that people are saying is positive about this. Okay. The other thing that people are saying is positive about this is that, like at least the lower court proceedings are continuing. All right. So fair. Okay. But the thing I would just want to explain about this is the reality and the facts of what's happening. Okay. People are being snatched off the street in the United States of America, including in some instances US citizens, and they are being moved to camps very, very far away from where they live. So like just a few examples. The student who was snatched from Colombia was moved first to New Jersey and then to the worst known camp inside the United States in Louisiana. The student who was snatched off the street at Tufts was also moved to the most notorious camp in Louisiana. People who have been detained who were coming into the United States have been moved in some instances to 6 separate camps inside the United States. Okay. You are supposed to file a writ of habeas corpus where you are located, according to this authority. All right. And so what that means is that people have to know where you are, and lawyers have to know where you are in order for your writ of habeas corpus to be filed within a quote unquote reasonable time after you are notified that you are subject to deportation. In practice, this particular loophole that some lawyers are pointing to is going to be very hard to activate, because one of the things that happened, for instance, in Mahmoud Khalil's case was that his wife didn't even know where he was. His lawyer didn't know where he was until something like 48 hours after he had been snatched. And who knows, based on what the Supreme Court said last night, what a reasonable time means. So, you know, one of the problems with the ways that this opinion is written is that if you are snatched off the street and you are sent to a camp, 1,000 miles away from where you live, and ICE doesn't tell anybody where you are, and then they say, okay, you've had your reasonable time to file a habeas corpus petition. You had an hour to do it. See ya. And they stick you on a plane. There's no getting you back. So the problem with this authority in general is that it actually doesn't, it claims, as Justice Sotomayor pointed out rightfully, all power to Sonia Sotomayor, okay, she's right about this, that at the bare minimum, all 9 justices agree that there has to be some form of due process. The reality is that the definition of how that due process is supposed to take place is incredibly vague and therefore very unlikely to be enforced. Okay. The other thing that I want to just say to everybody is this doesn't even touch upon the people who are already detained in El Salvador. So one of the problems with this situation is that once you're out of the country, you're gone. And we've talked about this here for quite a while now, unfortunately, that, U.S. courts don't have jurisdiction over foreign governments. They have jurisdiction over agencies here. And we've talked about the fact that no one should be under any illusion that the United States government could get all of those men back if they cared to, because very clearly they can send Kristi Noem there to film TikTok videos. But there is no jurisdiction by U.S. courts over, let's just say hypothetically, the CCOT gulag in El Salvador. They can't tell those people to release everybody and send them back. So the mechanisms of this court decision are really not much comfort at all. All right. And the worst part about it, in my view, is that they've essentially rolled out the red carpet here for the ongoing carrying out of atrocities, disappearing people off the street, sending them thousands of miles away to camps, and then after whatever the ICE deems to be a reasonable time, sticking them on a plane and sending them to God knows where. So, I have to give you one other interpretation that some lawyers are saying they think is a good thing, which is that if you happen to be outside of the country and you've been unlawfully deported, you allegedly have the ability, you do, but we'll see how this plays out again. Like facts versus theory is a vast gulf, all right? One of the things that other lawyers are pointing out is that the people in El Salvador who have been wrongfully sent there could arguably file a writ of habeas corpus petition in the district court for the District of Columbia, because that is where that jurisdiction lies. Okay. So we might see that. We might see an attempt for some lawyer representing some of these men to try to get the US government to get them back or to get them released. All right. We might see some effort to do that. Do I think it's likely to be successful at this point? No, I do not. And, I wish I had better news for all of you today, but essentially what the Supreme Court has done now is given permission to the Trump administration to black bag people off the street, send them to God knows where, claim that they're giving them time to file habeas when no lawyer and no family member knows where they are, where they've essentially been disappeared, and then to remove them from the country and potentially send them to slave labor camps in El Salvador and elsewhere. And I'm disgusted, and I think you should all be disgusted, and it is absolutely sickening. And I have to point out that, you know, what I've been thinking about since last night is how many of us, as soon as Biden was elected, how many lawyers, like really good, progressive, radical lawyers, you know, Ellie Mistal at the top of the list, called immediately for Supreme Court expansion when we had the capacity to do that. This is one of the reasons why, okay? Like, the Supreme Court hasn't been expanded in a very long time, and there's supposed to be one Supreme Court justice for every circuit court of appeals. We are not in that position in the United States right now, okay? We have 9 Supreme Court justices, and I think we're up to 13 circuit courts of appeal right now. Don't quote me on that. It's 12 or 13. 13. And we should have, when given the opportunity, expanded the court. I will just tell you that, you know, my viewpoint on this at this point is that we can't count on the Supreme Court to do the right thing. They may, you know, they still have this case pending before them about the Maryland father, who everyone admits was wrongfully deported, even though Trump's DOJ has now fired the lawyers who admitted it in court, put them on administrative leave. They still may say, oh, yes, of course, you have to make every effort to bring him back. Okay, but they know as well as everybody else that the courts don't have jurisdiction over El Salvador. And all it's going to take is the Trump administration going, yeah, we tried, can't get him back, in order for that to be a permanent disappearance of someone who literally, even under their far right-wing fascist worldview, has not done anything wrong other than being like brown. So, you know, I'm not feeling very hopeful about this at the moment, you know, but I am going to say one other thing here, okay? Nobody knows how all of this is going to end. And this is something I was having conversations like I do very early in the morning these days with other high-level folks, activists, organizers, people who are really like out there doing the work. And, you know, we all have to keep reminding each other that like any sequence of falling dominoes could change the course of how we think this is going to go within a matter of days. Okay. And so one of the things that means is that you really can't give up hope, right? You have to understand that the pressure that we levy politically, whether it's through events like what happened on Saturday, through hands off, whether it's through political pressure. There is a town in New York that managed to get 3 people, a mother and her 3 young children, returned from an ICE facility yesterday because they were so loud about it. This is a town that Tom Homan lives in. That mother and her children are coming home. So we have to remember that our influence here is not nothing, I guess is the way to put it. And that we have to kind of continue doing the work and continue fighting back and continue stepping up and getting really creative about it. This is the other thing. Mariam Kaba was saying this morning that part of the problem right now is there's a real lack of ideas about how to exert pressure. And we should get creative and try all sorts of things, right? Like if our elected officials are home and not in Washington, D.C., we should be protesting outside of their local offices or even outside of their homes, following, of course, all legal requirements. We have to start taking this to another level so that the pressure is felt. And you know, then we just have to kind of like hope that the pressure that we are levying, and that is also coming from all sorts of other sources, international pressure with regard to tariffs, right? The business industry putting pressure on, you know, the end of the stock market, even though it's up again today, because now there's some announcement that not all of the tariffs are going to take effect, but nobody seems to be able to confirm it because this White House is a shit show. Okay. We have pressure coming from all sorts of angles, and we need to continue engaging in whatever way makes sense. And I want to make one other thing clear here to everybody. Okay. Mass mobilizations are awesome, but please also don't neglect the fact that there are individuals where you live right now who are suffering, who have lost jobs, who have lost services that they needed, who, you know, are sick, who are one Social Security check away from being homeless, who, you know, desperately need food. There's all sorts of ways that you can make a difference where you live. And that is also part of the solution. Okay. Small acts of kindness are just as important right now as big mass mobilizations in the street. And so I just want people to really think about your own investment of time and energy right now to understand that being a keyboard warrior is not actually accomplishing anything. You need to be mobilizing where you live. You need to be working with people in need. You need to be doing support work for vulnerable populations. You can do all of these or any number of these. I generally recommend you pick 2 or 3 things that really call to you and you do those. And then you have to make a regular commitment. You've got to say, I'm spending 1 weekend a month doing volunteer work at the food bank, or I'm committing that I'm going to go to the next mass mobilization on the 19th of April. And in between now and then, I'm going to do 1 local meeting with my community pod about how we can make a difference where we live, right? Like, get very specific and granular on this stuff, because every single action matters. And every action that we take right now is a part of a brick in a wall. All right. So please don't neglect the local caregiving and caretaking in favor of just mass mobilization work, which is equally important. Okay. Some other immigration news this morning that we have to talk about. The new budget requests for DHS came out today, and they are they're allocating $45 billion to build concentration camps inside the United States, gulags, slave labor camps where they're going to detain migrants. This, by the way, just so you have a comparator or figure, last year, the amount of money that was allocated for this was about $3.5 billion. So everybody just needs to get prepared that there is a concentration camp coming to someplace near you. All right. And you also should be thinking right now about what you're going to do when that happens. Some of these facilities already exist. I mean, there's one like not right outside of New York City, not far from me where I live, that is currently being protested, and where the mayor of Newark, New Jersey has said he will not grant permits for them to reopen. Okay. We need a lot more local mobilization like that. And you're going to need to be prepared to do it where you live, like 100%. So I want people to be aware of that as well. Okay. Some very distressing news in terms of border crossing. Yesterday, there was some breaking news that a lawyer who is a U.S. citizen who represented a couple of protesters on a college campus was stopped returning to his home state from the Dominican Republic on spring break. And the way that this story has been told was that he was put in a room at the airport inside the U.S. I think he's in Michigan when he arrived. And a plainclothes officer came into the room and said, "We know who you are. We know who you represent. We know that you represent some really bad people," and demanded his phone. Now, this lawyer said, "You're not getting my phone. It's full of attorney-client privileged information. You can't have it." And stood on that for several hours until he was finally released. They did review his contacts file, but they did not review anything else. And, you know, this is something that I've been worried about for several months now, that U.S. citizens would start to get detained based on their work, their worldview, their social media posts. And this particular stop of a U.S. citizen, like, let me make this really clear. This man is a U.S. citizen, a lawyer. All he's done is give representation to some college protesters. Okay. And they threatened him. And, you know, good on him for saying, "No, you can't have my phone," attorney-client privilege. But who knows what'll happen next time something like that goes down, right? And so it's critically important that people understand their rights. But also, I will just say this, I have really serious worries right now about what the stakes are right now for anyone who has done any kind of political work crossing the border. And meaning, like, whether as a lawyer or otherwise. And we don't know where we're going to be on this in 3 to 6 months. You know, people have asked me, should I cancel my vacation to Europe? I don't know. I mean, like, I'm making my own decisions about whether or not I'm traveling outside of the country based on my own personal risk tolerance and my own profile. But I will just tell you that, you know, if you're anybody who has any kind of public profile doing political work, you need to be aware that this kind of thing is happening. And we have no idea how far down they're going to drill on this. In fact, when this news came out yesterday, a lot of very high profile activists were like, here's your warning sign that no one is safe. And I don't like to fearmonger here. And I certainly don't like to say to anybody that if you happen to be, let me just say it, white, not having a huge public profile, not really doing any kind of like, mass mobilization kind of work, not representing people who this administration has determined should be persecuted, right now, at least, you're probably fine, but nobody can guarantee you that. All right. And so from the perspective of this, it's really critical that people understand the risks. And I'm just going to say this to the person who's like, learn how to put a VPN on your phone. It doesn't matter. They're going to seize the device. They can't seize the device of a US citizen without a warrant. But I'm just going to say one other thing to everybody here. Okay. One of the things that's really disturbing about the way that all of this is going down is that all the things that should be constraining them from a legal perspective, they're basically flipping the finger to. And so, query how long it's going to be until somebody's crossing the border with their children and they say, you better hand over your phone or you're never going to see your kids again. Just throwing it out there. I'm not saying that's now. I'm just saying that like people need to be very aware. And yes, I will remind everybody that the Electronic Frontier Foundation has a booklet on what you should do to prepare to cross the border as a US citizen if you have commented on social media about anything political. Please go get it. It's EFF.org. And it's like a foldable brochure that you can hand out to anybody or you can print or you can just read yourself. Okay. And again, yes, all the advice here in the comments is wise, right? Don't surrender your devices. But I will just let you all know as well, this is a lawless administration. And ICE, for a very long time, far preceding this administration, has been a lawless organization. I know, trust me on this. Many of you know I did immigration-related work in the first administration. They've been operating way outside the bounds of the law for a very long time now with no consequence. So folks should be very cautious. You should be very cautious. Okay. The SAVE Act, as we have discussed, is an act that is designed to completely overhaul how people are allowed to vote in this country. It's already passed the House. It's coming up for a vote in the Senate on Thursday. This act, I have to remind everybody, has the potential to disenfranchise anyone who doesn't have a passport, doesn't have access to their birth certificate, or has a different name on their passport than what's on their birth certificate. This is a huge deal. It could disenfranchise married women, trans people, people who don't have access to their birth certificate, people who don't have a passport, which is like millions of Americans. All right. You need to call your senators like now and demand that they vote no on the SAVE Act. Now, this is all kind of like encompassed in a lot of right-wing propaganda about how we have to protect the right to vote and how this is just designed to make sure that voting rights are kept safe. It's horseshit. Okay. And it's like one of those moments where, unfortunately, a number of Democrats have fallen for this, and we've really got to get very, very, very loud. So please make your phone calls today. Please make your phone calls today to your senators and demand that they vote no on the SAVE Act. It's really critical. All right. It has the potential to impact future elections like unimaginable levels. Okay. Somebody asked me to comment about what happened with Liz Oyer. So Liz Oyer is the pardon attorney who was inside the DOJ, who was fired when she refused to put Mel Gibson on the pardon list so that he could get his guns back after being convicted of domestic violence. She had an experience. She was being called to testify in front of Congress, which she did yesterday. And she received a letter from the DOJ that was signed by someone under the auspices of the DOJ, a woman whose name I've now conveniently forgotten, saying essentially that, she could potentially be revealing process secrets. There is a process privilege, by the way, which says like if you're revealing the processes of the federal government in certain realms, that is a privilege and that information can't be disclosed, about how the pardon process works. Now, let me just say something. The pardon process is entirely public, all right? Like everybody knows how it's supposed to work. You apply for a pardon to the Office of Pardons inside the DOJ. The DOJ attorneys review that application. In any other ordinary administration, a list is presented to the president. The president makes the decision about who could be pardoned. Here, we have Donald Trump being like, pardon for you, pardon for you, pardon for you. Lots of those people have not been run through the Office of Pardons, at least not as far as we know. So Liz Oyer was ordered to put Mel Gibson on the list and said no, and she was fired. Then she was subpoenaed to testify in front of Congress, and she received a letter saying, you better not testify about what you know, really threatening, right? Okay, so she gets the letter. She's out in the car with her parents. Her teenage child is at home, and she gets word that armed U.S. Marshals have been sent to her home to hand deliver this same letter to her, purportedly. Honestly, it looked much more like a show of force. And thankfully, according to her, someone was able to inform the US Marshals before her child was terrorized that she had in fact received the necessary letter. But I think everybody should be very well aware that one of the things that is happening is that the US military forces, right? US Marshals are actually more like law enforcement, but let's just say US law enforcement is being mobilized to threaten people who pose some alleged threat to the regime. And Liz Oyer was on MSNBC last night talking about exactly what happened here. Again, this is kind of like a canary in the coal mine sort of situation, because what they're trying to do is intimidate people. They're trying to scare people into silence. And they're willing to kind of like scare their families in order to do that. It's like pure mafioso thug behavior. And also, you know, fascist regime behavior. And so it's designed to scare and intimidate people into not speaking out. And we can't fall for that either, by the way. And I'm really glad Liz Oyer didn't. Okay. One thing that I have to mention today is that there were a lot of comments and questions on the Patreon feed this morning that did something that I have really come to despise. All right. And I'm going to point it out because I think it is a sign of, I think it's honestly a trauma response. So I shouldn't badmouth it that much, but it's worth discussing in the context of where we are. All right. The questions go like this. What does Trump have on these Republicans that they won't stand up? Okay. Who paid off the Supreme Court? Like, yes, Thomas. Yes, Alito. We know about those. All right. Who paid off the whole Supreme Court? They just want that money. Right. I have to point something out to all of you, and I wish I didn't have to be this blunt. These people are true believers. Okay. They don't need money. They don't need to be incentivized. They don't need to be blackmailed to be carrying forward with this. Like, they're all in on fascism. And I know that's a much harder thing to kind of take in and understand, but like, I don't think John Roberts has been bought off, and we don't have any evidence of that. Okay. I don't think that, like, you know, let's just say hypothetically, Tom Tillis is being blackmailed. I think he's all in. And, you know, one of the things that I think we have to grasp about like America and American history, and this is something that I said this morning, just in my own pile of grief about how we are here again. It's like, we have always been this to some degree, right? Like, this is a nation that was founded on the transatlantic slave trade. We've always been this awful to some degree, right? Yes. Smaller and larger factions. Okay. Yes. Lots of big mythology about the American dream and freedom and, you know, blah, blah, blah. Right. Lots of great historical hagiography about how the United States is, you know, the land of the free and the home of the brave, where we still, like, you know, separate families, enslave people, rape Black women, hang Black people from trees. But yes, the land of freedom, right? One of the things that I need people to understand is that this is just another version of who we are. And while it's not all of us, right? While in fact, one of the things that Rachel Maddow pointed out last night is that the vast majority of people are completely opposed to what Trump and Elon are doing right now. Like, in some instances, like way, way, way more than a majority. Okay. There has always been a faction that looks like this. Hidden or public, under a hood or not. Okay. And until we come to terms with the fact that people don't need to be paid to be full of hate, right? People don't need to be blackmailed to want to separate brown children from their mothers, right? Until we come to terms with like these facts, we will not be able to end this. All right. People don't need to be corrupt to be evil. They can be corrupt and evil at the same time, but I don't think everybody needs that excuse. So I just want to invite everyone to remember, okay, that history is there so we can learn from it. And one of the things that is, of course, the most disturbing about the erasure of history that's happening right now in so many US government databases is that if we aren't aware of the ways in which history is repeating itself, we won't be forewarned about how to stop it. So my plea is to stop making excuses for them, because that's fundamentally what it is. They're being blackmailed. They're being paid off. No, they are true believers and they're freaking evil. And that's one reason why they have to be removed from power, so that they don't ever have it again. Okay. And they can, the other thing I'll just say about this is so many of these people could be making huge paychecks elsewhere, right? You think Stephen Miller couldn't be working for a think tank making millions of dollars a year, right? Tom Homan, big consultant for some border security company. They're not in this for the money. And they're not in this because they're being blackmailed. They're in this because they actually believe in what they're carrying out. So with all that said, I want to say one other thing here, okay? And that is that, as was pointed out this morning by a very astute person on Blue Sky, one of the things about this particular Trump administration versus the last one is that one reason why we've had this like shock and awe campaign in the first few months here, where they're moving as fast as they can, is because they are trying to not give the people enough time to mobilize, right? They're moving so fast because they know that what stopped them in their tracks the first time from actually being effective fascists were things like shutting down the airports when they passed them, when he announced the Muslim ban. So they're moving this quickly because they know that once we mobilize, and once we mobilize everyone we know, there's going to be some form of containment, okay? And so our obligation right now is to organize as effectively as we can, locally to save lives and keep people safe, statewide to make sure that like state attorneys general and governors are elected or kept in office who are pushing back, and there's a lot of them right now. And also nationally, right, in the form of mass mobilizations that are organized by people who really know what they're doing, like Indivisible and Move On, all right? All of these features matter. And the thing that I just want everyone to be really clear on is that like all hope is not lost. I know it feels really dire, okay? I know it feels really scary for a lot of folks. But at the same time, there's an enormous opportunity here right now, and we don't know how this is all going to end, right? I mean, at the bare minimum, what was pointed out this morning, and I think this was a valid point, okay, was that notwithstanding the harm that the first Trump administration was able to carry out, particularly with regard to family separation and other forms of just like absolutely despicable human rights violations, okay, the containment of like the United States government did not actually get damaged that much. The reason why they're dismantling everything so fast right now is because they know how deeply unpopular what they're doing is. They know that like 70% of America disagrees with Doge and Elon and everything that he's doing. They want their Social Security. They want people to have food stamps. They want elders to have Medicare, right? So we have an opportunity here to like move, all right? And I just have one other thing I have to say here, because I see complaints all the time on this feed, and I know this is in my audience. I know you all are in my audience, of older people complaining about Gen Z. Please stop doing that, okay? Every Gen Z person that I know is terrified right now and really, really, really angry. And you don't even want to talk to Gen Alpha about where they are on this, because I'll tell you right now, like they think Trump is the devil, justifiably so. So, you know, if where your turnout is happening, you're only seeing older people, you should ask the question about your internal organization, about why they're not extending invitations to younger mobilization organizations where you live. But don't blame an entire generation for this, because they get it, right? Gen Z in particular is one of the most accepting generations that we've ever seen. And yes, I know people complain about young white men being converted to Trumpism because of propaganda. That's a real concern, okay? But I'm going to say one other thing here. Every Gen Z person I know is actually already like enraged, and they are looking for ways to participate, and they want welcoming, and they want invitations, okay? So make sure that you are pulling people in, right? Rather than looking around going like, where are all the young people? Ask yourself whether or not anybody who you're working with has extended invitations, right? Okay? Like, don't blame people. Welcome them. Invite them in, including your neighbors who may not even understand what's happening, right? Like, I heard a story over the weekend about a situation where at a church, someone said, we're going to protest on Saturday. And this woman said, what, really? What's that all about? And the response that she got was, how could you not know what's going on here? You're not engaged. You're not paying attention to the news. Are you joking? Like, don't do that. Don't blame people for not knowing. Don't blame people for not being engaged. A lot of people are scared and checked out and in trauma response. So do your part to reach out, okay? We all have to be in this together, and we need everyone. And don't shame people for not being as engaged as you are, okay? Not a workable strategy for success. All right. That's it for today, I think. I think I've been mouthy enough on this broadcast. Please don't forget to subscribe here, like this broadcast, drop me a comment if you're watching on the replay so the algorithm knows you like what we're doing here. And of course, if you want to support me and my team financially, great people who make this broadcast happen every day and support me behind the scenes, please become a paid subscriber over on patreon.com/resistancelive, or you can click join here on YouTube to enter the live chat. These are two separate subscriptions, by the way, because there's no way to merge them. Thank you all for all of your support. All right, I will catch you all here live tomorrow. Reminder, I am on vacation next week. I will not be broadcasting all week next week. So everybody needs a break, and I'm taking one because I walk my talk. All right, you guys, I will see you all back here tomorrow at regular time. Thanks. Take care.